We're at the University of Rhode Island's Coastal Institute, and we're with Dennis Nixon, who's the Associate Dean at the Graduate School of Oceanography here, to talk about the British petroleum spill. Dennis is also an expert in marine law and the law of the sea. Dennis, how can we get to the point where we can actually be so complacent as to allow something like this to take place right under our noses?
It really was a stunning failure, and I thought long and hard about that and went back and did some research, and the reason we were complacent was because we didn't think we had a problem. When we look at the sources of oil in the ocean, the most recent study was done by the National Academy of Sciences in 2002. They found that 63% of all the oil going into U.S. waters came from natural seepage in the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of California, off the coast of Alaska. OCS activities, outer continental shelf drilling activities, including the drilling and the pipelining, accounted only for 2% of all the oil going into U.S. waters, which was the same percentage that came from recreational boating. So the story over the past 40 years was that we were really bad at polluting in the 70s. We began, 55% of all the oil in the last 40 years has gone in the 70s. By the 1980s, it had fallen to about 23%. We passed the Oil Pollution Act of 1990 in response to the Exxon Valdez casualty, and that dramatically improved the situation, so that by the 2000s, we produced only about 4% of the total of oil going into the oceans over the past 40 years. 2010, this disaster, and all of a sudden, our complacency was obvious and real.
After all that's gone on, when they slapped the bill on the table, we know that we've already got $20 billion in escrow to pay off some of the damages. Right. But what do you think the final line is going to be that British Petroleum has to come up with?
Well, I think the bill's even going to be bigger. We know that there's going to be about $10 billion in cleanup costs. They've already spent, I think, $170 million right now. They've got a long way to go because we're still going to be spewing oil for at least another month or so. We know that there are penalties and fines under existing federal and state statutes that would come out to about $3.5 billion. The best guess on compensatory damages, and that would cover everyone who's lost their job, their business has gone defunct, could possibly go up as high as $10 billion as well. There's a fourth category of damages called punitive damages, which are only available if the tortfeasor, in this case Deepwater, BP, if their actions were so egregious that you wanted to actually punish the company. It appears there is enough evidence that one could make a claim for punitive damages here. In this case, BP is actually kind of lucky because just in its last term, the United States Supreme Court, in the case of Exxon versus Baker, the last lawsuit involving the Exxon Valdez case from 1990, said that the punitive damages could not exceed the amount of compensatory damages in a case. So if we say that compensatories were at $10 billion, punitives could be as high as $10 billion, which to me puts the number then as a total of about $34 billion. Compare that to our previous big case of $4 billion for the Exxon Valdez.
With new regulations and new laws, the idea is how is that going to change what we do in the future? And also, I think a lot of people are wondering, who can we trust?
Well, who can we trust? I do have a lot of confidence in the commission that was appointed by the president. One of the people on that group you might know is Kate Moran, the former associate dean here at GSO. I think they're going to recommend some much tougher regulatory requirements for allowing deep water drilling to continue. I do not favor a permanent ban on offshore drilling. I'm an environmentalist who drove to work today. I want to have an electric car, but they're not out there yet. If we don't use some of the resources we have in U.S. waters, we're going to be forced to send more money to places in the Middle East that don't like us very much. So I do think we need to exploit offshore oil, but do it much more safely. I think that the knowledge is there, but we'd gotten lazy, we'd gotten complacent, and we had not required the oil industry to put the same attention on safety as they have on production efficiency.
Is there a real villain here, or is it just maybe spreading the guilt across all parties, from the government to the people who allow this to take place to British Petroleum for maybe dodging some of the corners?
Yeah. Everyone should share some responsibility in this, including all of us who are driving their cars. We're driving that demand for oil. I do think that when you read the accounts of what went on in the final days before the blowout, it was pretty clear that there were warning signs that were ignored, and there were some people who made some bad mistakes, and I think they should be punished for those. But in general, the culture that led us here is one that we all participated in. Those who want to get their pension checks from BP dividends, to those who wanted to say, yet one more day without an accident, we can't possibly stop the rig production now. That would ruin our perfect record. And all those bits of pride and greed interacted in a way with horrible consequences.
But should we be optimistic?
I have to be optimistic. We are 6 billion people in this world now, and the only way we're going to manage it through is with a sense of optimism that I think we can do this better. It doesn't mean we'll eliminate all oil in the oceans, but I know we can do a better job than we did in the Deepwater case.